What Donald Trump is trying to do is effectively make Congress a subordinate of his will and say, you can do whatever, you can say whatever you want. I'm just going to ignore and dismantle things within the executive branch. No matter what you say, go ahead and try to stop me. And the irony is that if he had gone to Congress, this Congress, where he's got control of both the House and the Senate, there's a half decent chance he could have had some of this dismantled through the political process.
This is the Ground Game Podcast, where we cover politics from the ground up. Here are your hosts, Tom Lobianco and Patrick Pfingsten.
From sea to shining sea above the fruited plain, this is the Ground Game Podcast. I'm Patrick Pfingsten. Tom is on assignment this week, so we'll hopefully hear from him again soon. But a lot to get to, and we wanted to not leave a void out there in the world of politics, because it's a freaking mess, you guys. And we're gonna have a lot to talk about on the show today. We'll talk to Brad Moss, who is a national security attorney based in D.C., handles a lot of issues revolving federal employee cases as well. Not like there's anything going on with those right now. So looking forward to our conversation with Brad coming up here in just a few minutes. First, though, I want to talk about the DOGEification of the federal government. It may not sound like it most weeks because I'm so vociferously anti-Trump, but I'm a conservative. Like, I came up in Republican politics. I worked on Republican campaigns for a decade. I've been spending the better part of my adult life trying to elect the best Republican, best conservative who can win in a lot of races that were really difficult ones for Republicans to ever win. And I've been pushing these traditionally conservative ideals for a long time, like lower taxes and a smaller government, reducing the size of the federal government, reducing the size of the federal debt. I'm all for these things. And a lot of people like me are and have been for years. It's the issue that we're running into today. This bull in a china shop that is Elon Musk and how they've been handling the absolute just implosion of the federal government is not only illegal, but in many cases has been unconstitutional. I want to cut federal spending. I want to cut federal spending by a crap ton. I want to reduce the size of the federal workforce by a crap ton. I'm all for these ideas. But the way that the Trump administration and with shadow President Elon have actually handled this has just been completely antithetical to the way conservatives have wanted to do things for years, because we believe in doing things the right way. That means acts of Congress to eliminate federal departments like the Department of Education or USAID. These are things Congress should be doing. It's a frustrating relationship with the truth, because conservatives, or at least what we thought were conservatives, now we know that they're just specifically Trump people. You know, they're Trump supporters, are running around saying, well, this is what we've always wanted. This is what we've always believed. It's not really what they've always wanted. It's not really what they've always believed, because this is the party of people who carried around a pocket constitution for 2 decades. Somebody should get one to Elon, because they seem to just not give a shit now about what's actually in the Constitution, what the actual policies and procedures are for handling things inside the federal government, for handling the federal workforce. And the way that they're doing this is just simply not conservative. It's not traditionally conservative. It's this anarchist sort of blow up the government sort of thing that isn't realistic. And that's why you're seeing judges put a stop on so many of these controversial ideas right away. You don't get anywhere. And to have a president just give away his power to an unelected bureaucrat who happens to be a billionaire who's usually pretty high on ketamine is just a really terrible look. It's a bad idea. But what makes this even more frustrating, and Democrats are MIA in this fight, just completely lost at sea. When their main talking points revolve USAID, when foreign aid polls about as well as cancer does, or they're trying to highlight the plight of some agricultural research service employee who got fired from his $115,000 a year job, you're not getting any sort of support from the public here. Generally, people, at least where I come from in middle America, where you are getting by, not with the help of a nice cushy government job, they look at government employees like that negatively, very harshly. So for your United States senators and congressmen to run around and say, well, this is Joe Blow who lost his $120,000 a year federal job overnight because of Elon Musk. While it may be illegal, it may be unconstitutional, and those things should be fought in court, you're not winning the PR game here. You're not winning the PR game based on USAID. You got to start taking the fight to these guys about what they're actually doing to hurt people. What these layoffs mean, what closing these departments mean. When you see these farmers who say they're going to have to go bankrupt because of contracts that were made with the federal government due to an Inflation Reduction Act program that the Trump administration now says we're not gonna honor those. So you're running into this whole problem where Democrats are they just don't know how to approach this. They're so pissed, they're so mad, but they don't have any sort of message. And it's so frustrating because as one of the feels like few remaining anti-Trump conservatives out there, I feel like I'm just on an island. Join me on that island, would you? Hop in the comments and join in and say I'm with you, Patrick, because this isn't working. All right, just a few quick thoughts from me there as we open up the show today. We'll bring in Brad Moss, a national security attorney, here on the Ground Game.
It's time to go in the huddle.
As the old song says, when stuff gets bad, send lawyers, guns, and money. We've at least got a lawyer to talk with us about what's going on in the federal government right now. Our friend Brad Moss, an Illinois native, because all good things come from Illinois, based with a Washington, D.C. law firm now, handles a lot of national security and workers' rights sort of issues for his firm in Washington. Brad, thanks for taking some time. Let's talk globally here. From a legal perspective, just how outrageous are some of the things that we're seeing from the Trump administration right now?
This is quite possibly the greatest and most systemic attack we've ever seen on the legal system, on the constitutional setup, and on the political apparatus as we've known it for the entirety of the post-World War II modern era of the United States government, and our civil service. What is currently happening, what Donald Trump is currently trying to do with these various executive orders, with the actions by these various officials out of DOGE, which is just run out of the White House, and with these various agency officials, is he's making what Richard Nixon did look like child's play. He's dismantling congressionally authorized funded agencies, doing it on his own, completely ignoring an entire separate branch of government that's supposed to be the one serving as the political check on it, and trying to effectively impose his will through pure shock and awe. The idea being he can move so fast, so brazenly, and so brutally that no one can catch up with it. The courts can't move that fast. Litigants can't move that fast, and Congress certainly isn't going to do much because currently it's controlled by the president's party and they more or less agree with what he's doing. It is an uncharted, unprecedented moment in American history. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this since possibly the Civil War, in terms of just complete dismantling of what we understand to be the United States government and the United States as a society. And no one truly knows where we will come out in the end here, how and what we will look like as a nation, as a government, as a constitutional republic at the end of it.
So here's maybe where my conservative slips out, where I look at what Musk and the DOGE bros are doing, of going in and just saying we're going to stop spending because there's a lot of things that we don't agree with in what the federal government is pumping out right now. I, as a conservative who wants less spending, I like that in theory. But is it actually legal for the administration, for the White House to just say, yeah, no, we're not going to spend any money on this because we don't want to?
The short answer is no. People have tried this in the past in various ways. If you go back to the 90s, Bill Clinton tried to do it with the line item veto. That got struck down as unconstitutional. There's statutes in law such as the Anti-Impoundment Act, which actually came up during Trump impeachment 1 with his whole extortion scheme with Ukraine, which the idea is Congress appropriates the funds. You don't get to just refuse to employ it and spend it as authorized by Congress. They created these agencies. You oversee them and implement them, but you don't get to just start canceling contracts, selling assets, and refusing to pay bills, which is what DOGE is doing, which is what Elon Musk is doing. They're not finding fraud. They're not finding even waste. They're just going in there saying, we don't like these things. It's not politically aligned with what we like, and so we're shutting it off. If you want to do that, you go to Congress. That's Congress's job. They have the purse strings. You ask Congress to take that money back. You ask Congress to withdraw the funding, but you don't get to do it by yourself.
That's what I've said about the Department of Education, right? That there's, again, this is my conservative slipping out, that there's reason enough to move some of the grant funding to other places, and you don't need this whole giant bureaucracy for when the federal government doesn't handle education policy, when it doesn't handle direct funding of schools, et cetera. But it's a congressionally created department of government. No president can just say, man, you're out. What the hell?
And this is the irony of conservatism being always the idea of, strict adherence to the text of the Constitution, strict adherence to the idea that Congress was the one who authorizes the expenditure of funds, who creates these things, and the executive is the one who simply enforces it. What Donald Trump is trying to do is effectively make Congress a subordinate of his will and say, you can do whatever, you can say whatever you want. I'm just going to ignore and dismantle things within the executive branch. No matter what you say, go ahead and try to stop me. And the irony is that if he had gone to Congress, this Congress, where he's got control of both the House and the Senate, there's a half decent chance he could have had some of this dismantled through the political process. He doesn't want to do that. It takes time. It's not sexy. There's no great optics. There's no Elon Musk saying we're going to do a video camera walkthrough of Fort Knox. He wants imagery and optics. He doesn't care about the details, and that's what Congress would have to do. So he said, forget it. I'm going to bulldoze everything. Just do it myself.
I mean, this is certainly unprecedented, right? Especially in the instance where we're seeing federal employees just getting locked out of their systems, their buildings. Just don't come to work if you work for USAID, and we'll let you know if you still have a job. Is that certainly the executive branch has leeway over who's working in the executive branch. But is it legal to just say you're out?
So it depends on certain circumstances and factors. So let's sort of outline this. About 100 years ago, we rewrote the civil service laws. We got rid of the patronage scheme. Actually, I should say more like 150 years ago, we rewrote this. Got rid of the patronage scheme. There's no more Tammany Hall. The idea was the civil service would be the career employees who brought in subject matter expertise and who were there from administration to administration. They were the backbone of government. Political appointees would serve at the top of the agencies. They pursue the particular administration's agenda. But the backbone of the federal government was these civil servants who were there to serve the Constitution and to provide expertise. It's been that, those laws have been modified over the decades, but a good chunk of the civil service, a good chunk of the federal government falls under those protections. But it's all subject to the idea that those laws are constitutional. No president has ever really agreed that they are, but no one's tried to do what Donald Trump is doing, which is to say, I don't care about the civil service laws. I'm going to invoke Article 2 authority to fire anybody and everybody I want. He's starting with the low-hanging fruit, what we know is probationary employees. Most of these individuals, not all, but most of them are people who served less than 2 years and are basically, even under the civil service laws, are considered at-will employees. That's low-hanging fruit. He's not basing it off anything other than they're easy to fire. He has no idea what these people do, no idea what their skill sets are. He's just, saying, oh, I'll just fire all of them because it's easy. The next target is to go after people who are within the civil service that are protected. He's just going to claim outright that the civil service laws are unconstitutional, that he can fire anyone within the executive branch. That's why he's pushing the Schedule F reclassification. That's why he's trying to just gut USAID the way he is. He's pushing this with the idea that go ahead and try to stop me. It'll take time for you to work your way through the courts. And in the end, I've got a very conservative Supreme Court. You don't know what they'll say. They might choose to side with me on this power of the executive branch, given the way the rulings have come down the last few years. Between the last two administrations, it's been very pro-executive branch the way these rulings have come out. We have no way to know if this court will say Article 2 overrules these civil service laws. It could. We just don't know.
I want to spend a lot of time on courts. But let me ask you this before we get there. I question, and again, whether it's legal or illegal or ethical or non-ethical, I don't know the answer. And maybe you don't either. But Elon Musk is one of the largest federal contractors we have, right? He gets billions in NASA, Department of Defense, all of those contracts, billions in EV grants, etc. And he's the one, well, maybe not, depending if you look at the filing that they just made in court the other day that said, oh no, he has nothing to do with DOGE.
Yeah, that was ridiculous on its
which
face.
Is blatant bullshit when he's literally standing next to the Resolute desk saying, here's what I'm cutting. It's insane. But the question here is, what authority does he have, right? If he's one, the authority, right? He might be a federal employee, a special employee, something like that, where I know there are certain time limits, but then there's the ethical part of it of can someone who makes so much money from the government be employed by the government at the same time? It is just farcical to me that like, say we would bring in the CEO of Boeing, to run the Department of or the Defense Department, and still get paid by Boeing while they're getting all these federal contracts. The ethics are insane, and I don't know where that reaches some sort of legal threshold.
So here's the reality on that. There are ethics guidelines. There are ethics laws that apply here. There are any number of protections that are supposed to exist in the system to rein in someone like an Elon Musk. But those laws all were premised on one idea, that the chief executive, the president, would care about them. We've had former senior executives or CEOs of defense contractors serve as Secretary of Defense. They had to comply with federal ethics laws. They had to put things in blind trusts,
And they were
things like that.
former executives. They
Yeah,
weren't
former
they weren't
executives.
literally working for the contractor at the same time.
Yeah, and there are ways to frame things around that with conflict of interest rules to quarantine off the cabinet official at certain points so they're not implicating something that may have been tied to past work they do. There are ways to do that. With Elon Musk, who is what's considered a special government employee, which is a thing. There's been countless SGEs over the past administrations. That's not unique to Trump. But what Trump has basically done is say, I will let Elon self regulate himself on what was a conflict of interest. I'm not going to intervene on it. If he says there's no conflict, I trust him. And I'm going to let him basically run wild with my authority, my approval to send his little, 22-year-old kids into these agencies, push aside security, bust their way into these systems, and start going through the data without regard to whether or not they understand it, whether or not they know what they're looking at, and whether or not they are properly trained to review this information. If they've gotten the proper legal training on the privacy implications, tax revenue implications, education privacy. I mean, any number of different laws that apply to these different databases. All these rules were premised on the idea that the president would care. Donald Trump doesn't care. He
What's
will
this?
blow
What's the
past it.
security clearance issue there? Is there a security clearance question too, based on these kids who haven't been vetted by the FBI? Who, I mean, we've already found out some of them are blatantly racist on the internet. So, like, I mean, but
Yeah.
but do they have the ability? Are they breaking the law by busting into something that has some sort of security level?
So it depends. So again, it comes down to it depends. So for a lot of them, they're not necessarily implicating classified systems. For the ones who have given themselves they rewrote code to grant themselves access to things, in particular classified areas, there are laws that would prohibit it. But the president is the ultimate decider when it comes to access to classified information. If Donald Trump gives authority for these kids to go into these systems and to go into these rooms, no one can overrule him within the executive branch. He can grant access to classified information to anyone he wants. He could give it to you right now to walk into those buildings and see all the classified data you would want. And no one in the executive branch could stop him. Only Congress could do it through impeachment and conviction. That is, again, one of those things where we have these processes. We have these protocols for how we decide who has access to what and what the vetting is. And Donald Trump has said, I don't care about any of that. I'm going to do it however the heck I want, and no one can stop me.
Good times. Good times. All right, so let's talk about the courts, which feels like our last refuge of having a clue here, because you've had a stack of federal judges now, circuit court judges, say what you're doing, whether it's based on the shutting off the spigot or access to Treasury or whatever it may be, have started to stop some of these most egregious actions by the DOGE bros. How long can that dike hold from the flood of stuff that just keeps coming? I mean, the ACLU can probably put a new lawsuit in the mix every day. But at some point, I mean, the system won't get overwhelmed, but stuff's going to get lost at some point, right? I mean, are the courts equipped to keep up with all of the, to take the Steve Bannon line, flooding the zone with shit, right? That's what they're doing legally. Yep. Can the courts keep up with that?
No, the courts were never designed to keep up with this level of just brazen lawlessness. And so here's the reality. There are going to be lives that get destroyed in one form or another. People will lose jobs that never get back. Finances will be messed up that will take years to fix. We've already got affidavits in some of the USAID litigation that we're seeing on the court docket. People who were, a woman who was 25 weeks pregnant, a U.S. employee being, forced on her own to try to get back because all aid was cut off, all communications were shut off. They just shut down the agency. with no plans for logistics. Now, they thankfully got home, the woman's okay, but there are going to be nightmare stories that come out of this of all the trauma, all the logistical failures because of how they just completely haphazardly have run this. There's going to be all kinds of damage to the US reputation overseas in terms of the aid we used to provide to these various countries to ensure our sphere of influence, to ensure we held off China from coming in with food, medical, assistance for voting elections, assistance for female empowerment, any number of things. We're pulling back on all that. Chinese are more than happy to walk in, say, here's all the money you need. Now you're going to do what we want. All right. It might come to pass that DOGE gets shut down. It might come to pass that a lot of what Elon Musk and Trump are trying to do gets pulled back or shut down to some regard. But it's going to take months, if not a year or two at minimum. And in that interim, any number of untold damage will be done to Americans, to our finances, to our reputation, our political system. And no one really can quite say how we come out of this other than traumatized and more divided. No, because you either love what's going on or you hate it. And is how you find a reconciliation from that, I don't really know yet.
So I'm not trying to be Chicken Little here. I'm really not. I'm a guy that's been around government for a long time. So I'm not one of those scream from the rooftops guys, but there's a part of this that really scares the crap out of me in the sense that JD Vance has already suggested that when the court makes an order that the administration disagrees with, that it should just blow it off. It goes back to the old Andrew Jackson, tell the court to come enforce it, right? Or tell the judge to come enforce it. It feels like we're facing a dramatic constitutional crisis when John Roberts puts out an order to the president that says, you must do this, you cannot do this. Can you hold the president in contempt? I mean, maybe. I mean, but
he's immune.
He's technically immune, right? So it's, even though I fear that we get to a point here that, and you've already seen with the rhetoric that Elon Musk trying to push people to impeach federal judges who've put a stay in or a temporary order of protection or something like that they want them impeached, that they're saying we don't respect the authority of the court in this instance. I don't anticipate you're going to walk me off the ledge here, but
I'm not.
I'm scared to death here that this is the kind of thing that we're going to run into that could just crack the foundation of our entire Constitution. Brad, am I wrong?
You're not wrong, and you're not wrong to be worried about where this will go on that front. That is quite possibly what we're all watching at the moment. So far, the administration has, with certain, exceptions where they've struggled on an agency basis to follow the court orders with these various temporary restraining orders. There's been some issues. I'm not going to make excuses for the government on this one when it came to those funding freezes where they messed up. They're still trying to fix that. But once this gets to the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court starts ruling against Trump, does he cross the Rubicon? Does he start saying, to hell with you, I'm still going to do it anyways? And by the way, Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, I'm holding a rally in 2 weeks where we're going to tell the country how proud we are of what I'm doing. And we're going to go march towards the Supreme Court to tell them what we think of them. That is one of the biggest concerns I have with this president. The first thing he did was pardon not just the low-hanging fruit, the ones who were, followed the mob into the Capitol on January 6th, but the guys who got convicted on conspiracy to commit sedition, the ones who were clearly violent, were beating officers, bringing pepper spray, had plans with weapons. Those guys and gals got pardoned as well. And now they all view themselves as heroes ready to march again for Trump. And I don't think he has any hesitation to employ them again and to say stand back and stand by. He'll do it once more, knowing he's got immunity. And if he comes to that point, we face a serious, and it's not Chicken Little to say it, we face a serious constitutional crisis. And you know, I I can't figure out what happens for it. I can't project where we go from it. I'm scared to imagine the violence that will happen not only in DC but in various parts of the country. And we find a way to reach a consensus in which we can still adhere to this system. You can't just like judges when they rule in your favor. You can't just like government when it's your party controlling it. If you do that, that's not a republic. That's not democracy. That's one party rule. And that's just not the way this works.
And I'll get you out of here on this, since you're such a ray of sunshine on that idea. I know your firm is representing Olivia Troy, who was threatened by Kash Patel, who may or may not be the FBI director by the time this posts. The retribution that we could see from this government, and I don't want you to step into anything that you can't with a client and that sort of thing, but it feels like the government will use its power, its authority to. I mean, this was Kash Patel even before he was FBI director, trying to push someone to punish someone for speaking up. I'm a nobody. I'm a radio host, podcast host, and write a newsletter, right? I'm a nobody. But there could be some serious things that could happen in the courts, especially if these guys find a friendly judge, an Eileen Cannon style judge, that could start to really use the courts to punish people. And that it is a terrifying possibility.
Yeah. I mean, look at what we just have going on today. I mean, you have the chief of the criminal division at the Justice Department resigning per her public email because of an improper order from the acting U.S. Attorney, Ed Martin, ordering her to open a criminal probe and pursue an asset seizure. What was that? What was the nature of the criminal probe? Don't quite know yet. We're waiting to find out. But this is where this begins, by coming in with these individuals, such as an Ed Martin, and saying, we're going to pursue whoever we want. We're only going to focus on our political enemies. And we have no shame, no ethics in this regard. We'll do whatever we want. We'll make quid pro quo deals with Eric Adams, which I'm sorry, his lawyers can protest all they want. I read the letter from his lawyer to DOJ. That's a quid pro quo in my view. That was clear corruption. This is where this goes, that only certain people will be prosecuted. Only certain people are forced to adhere to the law, and other people are given impunity to do what they want. It is a crazy, terrifying time. And I'll be honest, I'm really sick of living in interesting times.
Yeah, I wasn't a Harris supporter by any means, because I just didn't agree with her on anything, but I certainly believed that I'll take 4 years of disagreeing with someone on policy over whatever the hell we're getting, and we're certainly living that right now.
It's what the voters wanted. Hope the price of eggs was worth it.
Yeah, right. And so let's try and finish on a positive if we can, Brad. And I do have a positive, because I'm hopeful, notwithstanding the possibility of the administration or Trump or Elon or whoever just not recognizing the authority of the courts. I do think the Supreme Court will hold, because I think we've seen some rulings, like from Amy Coney Barrett specifically. I think Kavanaugh's been on a couple that give me hope that they're not going to let this thing just get completely off the rails. That's my shred of hope, scrap of hope in what's out there. Do you have any positives that you're seeing out there, that like it's not all going to wind up a giant dumpster fire?
The reason I do have that similar hope is, ironically, because of the true conservatism of those justices compared to what I view as Donald Trump's perverted version of it, in their view of being strict textualists and adhering to the actual language of the Constitution. I think they will, as so many of the rest of us do, view Trump's actions going far beyond his authority, perverting the very nature of separation of powers, completely abusing the process, and something that will have to be reined in. I don't expect him to lose every case. I fully expect he will be able to push some of this through. I fully expect some of these agencies will probably end up going away. A lot of these employees who are getting fired probably will not be coming back. But I expect the worst excesses of this to be reined in by this court, even with his own appointees. I think it's too far for even them. But let's be realistic about what we're saying here. We're putting it all on a couple justices, a couple men and women in black robes in Washington, D.C. to save us from this. This is the last line of defense. That is not a great place to be in. And because that was a sour note, I'll leave you on a good note. And the good note, the positive note is my prediction: Bears go to the playoffs next season.
See, I was going to finish with sports too. That my Illini beat your Wolverines this year. So
go blue, go blue.
So at least there's that. At least all is well in the world that Illinois is beating Michigan. So
yeah, you get 1 year. We got some nice nice new people this upcoming season.
We won't talk about the team that won the national championship though, because you hate them more than I do, but I certainly don't love them.
Trust me, I despise them.
Brad Moss, national security and constitutional lawyer in DC, our good friend. Thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it, and thanks for walking us through all these issues.
Absolutely, anytime.
It's time for the second half.
All right, so just one question that I'd had submitted to us on social media at our Ground Game podcast handle at ground_game_pod. Send us your questions, send us an email, drop your questions in the comments, and we will get to them in our shows this week, next week, and as we move forward. The question that came to me was from a person who knows that I cover a lot of Illinois politics. And certainly if you were watching MSNBC last week, you saw that my governor, J.B. Pritzker, he had some really pointed comments about Donald Trump, made a real inference to Republicans being Nazis, which was a little much in my book. But the question that I got is J.B. Pritzker the guy for Democrats in 2028? Here's the problem. For the Democrats to recapture the middle, they either need a middle of the road centrist coalition builder type, or they need the opposite sort of populist as J.B. Pritzker or as Donald Trump. It's essentially the eat the rich side of the Democratic Party. And certainly that doesn't bode well for J.B. Pritzker, because this is a guy who's an uber progressive, at least specifically on social issues, and is worth about $4 billion. So he doesn't really relate to your median voter in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. But he's also the only Democrat in the country at this point who seems to be paying attention to the resistance, who seems to be trying to lead the charge against Trump. So if he's able, at least in the next few months, to keep getting earned media, to make his media hits, haven't seen him a lot on your MSNBCs and your CNNs the last few weeks, but certainly there's a belief among his team that he's the guy who can stake out the anti-Trump position, and it's going to be their way to try and springboard him into a run for president in 2028. All right, that's it for the show today. Thanks so much to Brad Moss for joining us. Really enjoyed our conversation with him. Dude knows his stuff, and I appreciate him, a good friend of mine, for taking some time and talking through the legal stuff with us. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Find us on Twitter. We're at ground_game_pod. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and join us as we continue to try and build our little section of the YouTube world here and keep talking about politics in a way that matters to you and matters to real people, because Lord knows the talking points we're getting from the left and the right and the national media right now are pretty much bullshit. And I'm tired of that. Let's do it together. Thanks so much for joining us here on The Ground Game.